Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Big Rican on Sports podcast. I am your host. I am the Big Rican, and today is Saturday, June the 27th, 2020. And as I have said for the last several weeks, Big Rican on Sports is now a proud member of the Time Skew Podcast Network. So last week we hit baseball. Next week we're going to hit baseball again, even though I have all the gear on. Tone and Alex will both be back with me next Sunday night at 8:30 to do another live hit as we have a season. Hopefully. But now at least it's not about players and owners and running their mouths. It's mostly about the health concerns, which are the most important concerns that anyone should have. So this week I want to take a step back since we're getting a lot of baseball in here, and I want to do something different. Now, obviously, sports are a huge part of my non-family life. So I want to bring a part of my family life into the podcast, too, because not only am I a psychotic Met fan, lunatic, bleeding scarlet and gray Ohio State fan, I ride with the wine and gold every day of the year of the Cleveland Cavaliers, and of course, I bark like a dog in the dog pound for the Cleveland Browns. But there's something else I have that may be even more fanatical than my sports love, and that is my film collection. So I try and wear something that goes with the theme of the show, and today I have on my New York Mets t-shirt with the Avengers on it. So I decided, you know what, it's time I put this out there, and I'm going to rank my top sports movies. So I spent a good couple of days this past week just basically trying to figure out what's my top 10. It's too big for that. I talked to my buddy Nick, who we've heard on the podcast before too, and he said, well, you're forgetting this one, and you're forgetting this one, and you're forgetting this one. So finally what I did was, I broke it down by the genres I enjoy watching, and I'm going to give you my top films in there. Some of them are 10, some of them are 5. So I'm going to take a stab at this. Now I'm going to put a little caveat on this too. These are films that A, I own, or B, if I don't own them, I have seen them more than once. So with that, I'm going to get started. So the categories I'm doing, of course, baseball is going to be the final one because that is the one I've watched the most. Then we have football films, basketball, and then, of course, the boxing/martial arts category, which is what I'm going to start with. So, a little background. I was born in 1979, so basically in between Rocky 2 and Rocky 1 and 2, and then, of course, 3 came along, so there was a big push on the boxing movies. Of course, in the 80s, there was the martial arts films with Karate Kid and such. So I'm going to go through my personal favorites in that genre, and I'm going to go 10 to 1, kind of like David Letterman used to. So number 10 is the epic Martin Scorsese film Raging Bull. Robert De Niro plays Jake LaMotta. Before I dive into this, I don't own any of the movies as far as content goes. This is just me giving my opinion on them. So Raging Bull with Robert De Niro, where he embodied Jake LaMotta not only as the boxer, but also as the man. Phenomenal film. If I'm not mistaken, De Niro won an Academy Award for this, and if he didn't, he should have. So that's number 10 in the boxing martial arts list. Number 9 is Cinderella Man, and I am not the biggest Russell Crowe fan at all, but he was so good as Jim Braddock in this movie. It talks about how he was a boxer, was injured, went back to working, and then came back with the Southpaw style, which ended up getting him into big fights and winning championships, and it was a great story to be told. Renee Zellweger is also very good in this film, but I got Cinderella Man at number 9. Number 8, Karate Kid Part 2. When Daniel and Mr. Miyagi go to Okinawa to deal with the death of Mr. Miyagi's father, and of course we have that great fight at the end where Mr. Miyagi says, Daniel-san, this is not tournament. And he throws the bridge away anyway, and he fights Cho-san, and he ends up winning the fight. My favorite part of that was not the fight scene at the end, which was great. It was actually the scene with the tsunami, or the typhoon, excuse me. When you see how much those characters were more about people around them as opposed to themselves. And they're helping everybody, and of course him chopping the piece of wood in half with Sato underneath the house. So Karate Kid Part 2 comes in at number 8. Number 7 is the newest movie on this list, and that is Creed, the Rocky spinoff. Michael B. Jordan was phenomenal as Adonis Johnson Creed. Um, Background on it, he basically is Apollo's illegitimate son. Felicia Rashad steps in and plays Apollo's wife and finds him at the orphanage shortly after his father's death at the hands of Ivan Drago. Um, he then grows up as her son, and unfortunately, it's in his DNA, and he becomes a fighter. And he goes to Philadelphia because it's time to call in the family favor, and he is trained by none other than Rocky Balboa. For those who don't know this, Rocky Balboa won the Golden Globe and, in my opinion, was hosed out of the Oscar for playing Rocky in this movie. It was a phenomenal, phenomenal film. Also, Tessa Thompson, who plays his girlfriend, was outstanding. And we get to see her in the MCU. There's my cat making his appearance. Number 6, Rocky 3, the Mr. T one. And, of course, the best training montage in all boxing film history. Maybe 1A to another Rocky movie's number 1. So Rocky 3, of course, he loses the title to Mr. T on the night Mickey dies, and then he changes himself into basically a middleweight fighter, or as they said in the actual fight at the end of the movie, this is not the Rocky we expected. He's out here looking like Apollo Creed. Great. Stallone and Carl Weathers on screen were always phenomenal. So Rocky 3 comes in at number 6. The top 5. I get a lot of heat for this one, but this is, again, my list. Rocky Balboa at number 5. The reboot of the Rocky story, taking it all the way back to the beginning. Background again. You open the film, and Adrian has passed away. It is Rocky and Paulie basically against the world. So the cold open of the film is what really got me. I remember watching it. It was on one of the movie channels. This is back, 14 years ago. You had Antonio Tarver, who played Mason Dixon, the heavyweight champion of the world. He beat this dude senseless in like the first round. People are throwing garbage and stuff. And one of the commentators said, people long for a champion who can, it's something about bring us back to the days of old. And the street corner group singing from Rocky 1 starts singing, take it back, do-do-do-do. I mean, it just grabs you right from the beginning. And it's a great story. It's a retelling, basically, of the origin story of Rocky. He now owns a restaurant called Adrian's. It is a phenomenal film. It took him almost 15 years to get this film made after the debacle that was Rocky 5. Number 4, I have Rocky 4. The fight, the death of Apollo Creed in the first act, the training montage and all training montages to go with the first of what I like to call the Fast and Furious montages, when it's a 6-speed Lamborghini that he shifts 84 times. Thought you only saw it in Fast and Furious movies. Guess not. And of course, the training montage in Russia and the epic 15-round fight against Ivan Drago. What else is there to say? It's trivia point. It's the only Rocky film to not feature Gonna Fly Now, which was on the original soundtrack from the 1977 film. Number 3 is one that also should have won an Oscar, and that is Will Smith's turn as simply the greatest in Ali, which took him from after the Olympics, through the Sonny Liston fight, through the suspension for not answering his draft card, all the way to the George Foreman fight, the Rumble in the Jungle. Listen, Will Smith didn't do this movie. He became Muhammad Ali and did this movie. He was handpicked by the greatest himself. Jamie Foxx as Bundini Brown, outstanding. John Voight as Howard Cosell, outstanding. But Will Smith should have won an Oscar for this movie. Number 2 is maybe the greatest martial arts film of all time. And again, I'm saying this of films I've seen, so no disrespect to Bruce Lee, but I've only seen maybe half an hour of Enter the Dragon. But in my opinion, it's The Karate Kid. Again, I'm an 80s kid. The story of the kid moving from Jersey to Reseda, California, and meeting Mr. Miyagi, who was his building super, and him learning karate from him beating Cobra Kai. Everybody remembers the crane kick, and everybody wanted to do the crane kick. So much so that Disney films have actually used the crane kick in training montages in their movies. Their animated movies. And the number 1 In the boxing martial arts genre, for me, is the original. It is the 1,000,000 to 1 shot. The best picture winner, Rocky. Easy call here. This is one of the greatest films of all time. It may be in the boxing genre, but Rocky is a love story. It's really catapulted Sylvester Stallone into our consciousness as a society. Think about who played Adrian, Talia Shire, who was a part of two of the greatest movie franchises of all time, The Godfather and Rocky, coming out roughly around the same time with all of them coming out around the same time, except for The Godfather 3, which, whatever. So just to recap, the boxing martial arts. At 10, Raging Bull. At 9, Cinderella Man. At 8, The Karate Kid Part 2. 7, Creed. 6, Rocky 3. 5, Rocky Balboa. 4, Rocky 4. 3, Ali. 2, The Karate Kid. And number 1, of course, was Rocky. So the next one is only a top 5. And that's because I've only seen very few films in this genre with this sport. And that's basketball. Now, again, The Fish That Saved Pittsburgh apparently was outstanding. I am a sports fanatic who's never seen Hoosiers. And I refuse to put Space Jam on this list. So we're going to start at number 5. And number 5 is, of course, the Omar Epps, Sanaa Lathan driven love story of love and basketball. Two kids, Crenshaw High School in Los Angeles, both go to USC. Omar Epps' character, they end up dating after high school and in college. Omar Epps' character decides to declare early for the draft and move on, and he forgets his next-door neighbor, the girl who played hoops with him every day. At the end, you get the happy ending. They get married, and his wife plays in the WNBA. Number 4 is Coach Carter, the Samuel L. Jackson epic about inner-city basketball. Think about some of the names in this movie. You got Samuel L. Jackson, Channing Tatum. Those two were the guys who really ran this film. You had a couple of other guys. Antoine from One Tree Hill was in it. The guy who played Rudy in The Rookie was also in this film. It was a great movie about being a better person than a better basketball player, and growing into a better man than a better basketball player, and about becoming more than just a basketball player. Great film. I like almost everything Samuel L. Jackson's ever done. Number 3 is the old 90s movie with Nick Nolte and Shaquille O'Neal, and that is Blue Chips, which took us into the dark underbelly of college basketball. The money given to people to go to certain places. We've all heard what happened with Pitino. We've heard of pay to play at different schools, and now we're to the point where guys only have to go 1 year and then can go to the pros. But Blue Chips was such a great movie. Shaq was not only intimidating, but he was funny at times. Great film. Number 2, the Spike Lee joint He Got Game, starring Denzel Washington and Ray Allen. Everyone knows the name Jesus Shuttlesworth. That's where it comes from. Spike Lee wrote a phenomenal film about a kid who was going to be the next big thing, and his recruitment into college. Denzel plays his father, who accidentally killed his mother and has spent time in prison, and is let go to convince his kid to go to the school the warden of the prison went to. The kid went where he wanted to go. But it's a phenomenal film. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. The number 1 basketball film to me is White Men Can't Jump. Woody Harrelson, Wesley Snipes, Rosie Perez, Warren G is in it, for those of you who know who Warren G is. This is the schoolyard ball movie that no one knew they needed. I personally and other friends of mine, we all got in trouble trying to sneak into this film because we were too young because it was a rated R movie. Other friends of ours went and saw it with their parents because they didn't think it was that crazy, and then the mouth on everybody got us all in trouble. It is one of the most quotable films in sports movie history. So that's my number 1. And if you haven't seen White Man Can't Jump, I highly, highly recommend it. So that top 5, just real quick again. You have Love and Basketball at 5, Coach Carter at 4, Blue Chips at 3, He Got Game at 2, and White Man Can't Jump at 1. So the next one is only 6 films, and it's hockey slash golf. And I say it like that because there haven't been a whole lot of hockey movies that I've seen. There are not a whole lot of golf movies that I've seen. I have never seen Youngblood with Rob Lowe, not in its entirety, but I hear it's pretty good. So we're going to start with the number 6 film, and I know this is going to cause some ruckus in my family when my sister listens, but number 6 is the original Mighty Ducks movie. Emilio Estevez plays lawyer Gordon Bombay, who is a former Pee Wee prospect and junior prospect who was injured and didn't quite make it to the NHL, and now as part of community service for a DWI, he has to coach a youth hockey team. Everyone knows the term triple deke. Everyone knows about quacking to get themselves going crazy. I love this movie. A lot of the stuff that Disney has done that's live action has not been my cup of tea, but this one, I love this one. At number 5, we have the Paul Newman-driven Slapshot. Everyone knows the Henson Brothers. Those 3 dudes with the glasses who used to just punch people in the face. I saw this at a very young age. Didn't really know who Paul Newman was at the time. But I love this movie. It's semi-pro hockey, but it's just, this is a great film. And when the Hansons decide to start cracking heads, they start cracking heads. But the best scene is when they're listening to the anthem, and the referee comes over to them and tells them they can't be doing what they normally do, and they yell at the referee and says, "I'm listening to the anthem." Great movie. Number 4 is actually one that combines the two, and that is Happy Gilmore. Of course, Adam Sandler washes out as a hockey player, starts hitting golf balls to try and make money because he can hit them 1.5 miles. Hysterical film. Probably one of the last true funny Adam Sandler movies. Of course, another appearance by Carl Weathers, playing Chubbs, who has a wooden hand because an alligator bit it off. And there is not a single person who has ever set foot on a golf course that was a sports fanatic that didn't try and walk up and hit a golf ball like that. At least once. Number 3, and this is where the only serious film on this list, and that is The Legend of Bagger Vance. I know. Why this one? Well, the cast is part of it. Jack Lemmon plays the caddy at an old age. Matt Damon. I almost said Muhammad Ali. Will Smith, Charlize Theron. The premise behind it is Matt Damon, who plays a man by the name of Randolph Jr., plays against Bobby Jones and, now I'm missing the other guy's name. Well, they play, it's a tournament that they're playing against each other, and Juna is a very flawed man who couldn't recover from trauma after World War I. It's long, but it's very, very good, and I highly recommend it. Number 2 is the Kevin Costner, which you will hear that name again, the Kevin Costner movie Tin Cup. Kevin Costner and Cheech Marin are hilarious in this movie. Rene Russo plays the therapist slash love interest. Don Johnson plays the guy who he's trying to beat. He hits a ball with a shovel during the U.S. Open. Tin Cup's hysterical. Costner plays a drunk pro who's teaching as opposed to playing on tour. Again, Costner in a sports movie just goes together. Mostly it's with the last one I'm going to talk about, but Costner in a sports movie always does well. And the number 1 film for me in this genre, there can only be one, and that is Caddyshack. Rodney Dangerfield, Ted Knight, Chevy Chase. These 3 in this Harold Ramis written and directed juggernaut of comedy. This is one of the funniest films of all time. And it wasn't even supposed to be what it was. This was supposed to be about Noonan and all his friends and what they did. But Chevy and Ted and Rodney were so funny, they changed the whole specter of the movie. And then you get to meet Carl Spackler, played by Bill Murray, who is the philosopher in the Philosophizer. I sound like Spackler. Who's the philosopher in the film, but also the assistant greenskeeper. And, of course, our favorite animatronic gopher. Uh, Listen, Caddyshack is one of my all-time favorites. When I tried to do just a top 10, Caddyshack was in the top 10. So just to recap the hockey and golf category, the Mighty Ducks come in at 6, Slapshot at 5, Happy Gilmore at 4, The Legend of Bagger Vance at 3, Tin Cup at 2, and Caddyshack comes in at number 1. So we got 2 categories left. The 2 biggies. Football and baseball. Obviously, baseball is going to be last. I'm not a huge fan of football films. I am a baseball guy through and through. But these 10 films always got me. I've seen all of them more than once, with the exception of one. And that one I saw once and sat through from beginning to end and didn't move. So number 10 is Invincible, the Mark Wahlberg starring true story of Vince Papale, the regular Joe off the street who ended up making it to the be a member of the Philadelphia Eagles in the 70s under head coach Dick Vermeil. Now, of course, a lot of these movies are inflated, but just right there, he was a regular guy who went to an open tryout, and he made it to the Philadelphia Eagles. Plus, I like Wahlberg. Number 9, The Express, the film story of Ernie Davis, who was the Syracuse Heisman Trophy winner after Jim Brown was the Syracuse Heisman Trophy winner. Underrated in this movie is Dennis Quaid as their head coach. Phenomenal story. Phenomenal job by Dennis Quaid. For those who don't know the story of Ernie Davis, he was a top draft pick of the Cleveland Browns. So at one point in time, the Cleveland Browns backfield would have been Jim Brown and Ernest Davis. During his physical to get into the NFL, it was discovered that Ernie Davis had leukemia, and he passed away before he could ever play a snap in the NFL. Number 8 is the Oscar-winning The Blind Side, based on the true story of Michael Orr, who is a Super Bowl champion offensive lineman in the NFL today, taken in by the Toohey family to try and help him out. They became his surrogate family. Sandra Bullock won Best Actress playing Leanne Toohey, and I'll tell you what, he takes a lot of heat for the book and the film, but it is a very, very good movie, and the guy who plays Michael Orr is so good. He's so good. Tim McGraw as her husband, and Kathy Bates as the tutor. All phenomenal in this movie. You actually get to see a few coaches, too. Phil Fulmer, when he was at Tennessee, is in this movie. And you get to see my least favorite coach in all of college football, Nick Saban, when he was at LSU. Because it was right around the time Saban left LSU and went to the Miami Dolphins, and it's actually referenced in the movie. Then we get to number 7, The Longest Yard. And before everybody jumps on me, the original. I don't do the Adam Sandler one. I don't care who's in it. The original with Burt Reynolds playing the out-of-control former quarterback who gets into trouble, goes to prison, and is given the option to play in a football game against the guards. And if they lose and they throw it, he'll get out early. Of course, Paul Crewe decides, I can't do that to the game. Ends up winning the game, and of course, does not get out early. But it's a great, great film. And if you like just gritty, evil football movies, The Longest Yard's the one for you. At number 6, we do have an Adam Sandler movie, and that is The Waterboy, the story of Bobby Boucher and the South Central Louisiana State Mud Dogs, coached by none other than Henry Winkler himself. For anybody who listens to this, the guy who played Sean's father on Boy Meets World plays Farmer Fran, who is a Bayou hillbilly who doesn't speak English. He speaks Bayou gibberish. Hilarious. You have the Big Show's cameo as Captain Insano. Kathy Bates as his mom is off the rails. Maybe the funniest football movie ever made. Number 5 is, in my opinion, maybe the second funniest football movie ever made, and that is The Replacements. Keanu Reeves, Gene Hackman, Orlando Jones. Basically, there's a strike in the NFL. They bring in replacement players to finish the season. Keanu Reeves went to Ohio State. Shane Falco, they called him Footsteps because he messed up in the Sugar Bowl, and he was really nothing in the NFL. Uh, this ragtag bunch, of course, wins 3 out of 4, gets to the playoffs. You have the big ending where he hits the death tight end touchdown to beat Dallas. Nigel Gruff is one of my favorite characters, the field goal kicker who is built like this, and he's a drunk, and he is a gambler. But the performance that gets left out every time is Jon Favreau as Danny Bateman, the psychotic cop linebacker who, when he sees red, he has to hit it. Favreau, who has gone on to be a cornerstone in not only the MCU, but now Disney Plus with The Mandalorian, is outstanding. Number 4, and I just watched this one the other day, and that's Rudy. Rudy it'll tear your heart out, and it'll make you smile, and it'll give you goosebumps. Based on the true story of Daniel Rudiger, who to this day, and it's 2020, is still the only player ever carried off the field at Notre Dame Stadium. Fun fact, Bob Golick, Mike Golick's older brother, actually played on that team with Rudiger. Sean Astin, when you see this, he came a long way since Mikey and the Goonies. Another underrated Jon Favreau performance, Rudy, and also Charles S. Dutton, who played Rock on television and in several different films, he played different characters, was awesome in this movie as the head groundskeeper at Notre Dame Stadium. Number 3, you see him up there, the Cleveland Browns, and that is Draft Day, where Kevin Costner cemented himself as the best GM in Cleveland Browns history. Scarily true. Another great cast: Kevin Costner, Jennifer Garner, Dennis Leary, Terry Crews, who played the owner? It'll come to me. Basically, he's got the 7th pick in the draft. He gets suckered into trading his next 3 years first round picks to get the number 1 pick in the draft. They all think they're taking a quarterback. He decides to take the King of Wakanda. Yes, Chadwick Boseman plays Vontae Mack, a linebacker from the Ohio State University, taken at number 1. And through wheeling and dealing, he gets Vontae at 1. He gets a running back by the name of Ray Jennings at 7 from Florida State, whose father played for the Browns. That's Terry Crews. And he keeps at quarterback, of all people, the guy who played Superman on Smallville. How much better can you get? But Costner's performance as Sonny Weaver was off the charts. It was phenomenal. It's a remote drop for me. Number 2 is a teenage movie, and it's not Friday Night Lights. It's Varsity Blues. Think about the characters these guys have played since. Scott Conn has played Danny. On Hawaii Five-O for 10 years. The late Paul Walker, James Vanderbeek, Dawson Leary himself. It's a story about Texas high school football. Paul Walker plays Lance, the starting quarterback, the All-American boy who blows his knee out. Vanderbeek comes in and is a more than able backup, and he wins a ton of games and wins a district championship when Billy Bob, who, they call him the man-child, has his own zip code, catches a ball on a hook and ladder and carries half the other team into the end zone. But Varsity Blues as a whole is a phenomenal film. It's a little angsty, but it's a teen movie that MTV produced in the 90s. It's going to be angsty. And number 1 on the football list, we're going back to Denzel, and that is Remember the Titans. Not just for the quality of film, not just for some of the actors who have been there. Of course, Gary Bertier, because I can't remember the actor's name, went on to play Opie on Sons of Anarchy. The guy who played Julius was actually one of the trainers in the Creed films that Michael B. Jordan did. Listen, Remember the Titans, not only is it Denzel at his best, not only is it based on a true story, but it is a lesson that we should still try and learn today. And it is a phenomenal film. And I actually call Trevor Lawrence from Clemson Sunshine a bunch too. Thought I'd throw that in there. So just to recap the football ones, of course, at 10, Invincible. 9, The Express. 8, The Blind Side. 7, The Longest Yard. 6, The Waterboy. 5, The Replacements. 4, Rudy. Number 3, Draft Day. Number 2, Varsity Blues. And number 1, Remember the Titans. Now we get to the last one. I've been running my mouth for a half hour. We get to the best sports movie genre that there has ever been and there will ever will be. And that is, of course, the baseball films. Now, no, I am not including Avengers Endgame for that cameo shot of Citi Field as part of this. Although I should. Kidding. I am also not counting Frequency, the Dennis Quaid, Jim Caviezel movie about the Aurora and being able to talk to his dad 50 years earlier or what have you, 40 years earlier. Why would I include that? Because it's based around the 1969 World Series. That's not going to be a part of it. And notice the 2 shout-outs were in non-sports movies were for the Mets. So, I'm going to give you my top 10, and this is my top 10. The top 10 baseball films of all time can be, you can run a ton of names out there. You can run Bang the Drum Solo, you can run The Pride of the Yankees, you can run 42, 61. None of those films are on this list because of one thing or another. I just think these are better. Number 10 is John Goodman's turn as the Babe. The look at Babe Ruth's life from being a punk little kid on the streets of Baltimore, going into the orphanage, meeting brother Matthias, learning how to play, being signed by the Baltimore Orioles and sold to the Boston Red Sox, and then, of course, his sale to the New York Yankees, and finally the Boston Braves. It runs the gambit from his wild craziness to his first marriage to his second marriage, which is the one that lasted, to finally his end of his career with his 714th home run in his final game. John Goodman as Babe Ruth was outstanding. There are a lot of people who disagree. I am one of the people who do not. He was outstanding. Number 9, and I added this one at the last minute, and that is A League of Their Own, the story of the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League that was started during World War II when all the big stars were actually in MLB, were signing up to fight in World War II. Gina Davis, Madonna, Rosie O'Donnell, Lori Petty, Tom Hanks, directed by the late Penny Marshall. What a great film. On a side note, this movie started a run for Tom Hanks that included Philadelphia, Forrest Gump, Apollo 13, and of course Saving Private Ryan. This is what rebooted Tom Hanks' career, and as the story goes, when he introduced himself at the first read-through, after he said, "I'm Tom Hanks," according to legend, Penny Marshall then said, "Tom, I need you to apologize for your last few movies." Number 8 is the childhood rite of passage film that will never, ever go out of style, and that is The Sandlot. There are no words to describe what The Sandlot means to me, because that's how my friends and I used to do it. The insult barrage between Hamilton Porter and the pretty boy kid when he screams, "You play ball like a girl." I can remember people saying that on the fields when I was a kid. Everybody remembers Benny the Jet and Hercules and James Earl Jones playing the guy who owns Hercules, and of course the only night game is on 4th of July, and the Jet steals home. Sandlot's forever etched in our minds as a movie we grew up with. Number 7 is actually the most recent of all of these films, and that is the partial biopic of the 2002 Oakland Athletics, Moneyball, starring Brad Pitt and Jonah Hill. You want to talk about a good baseball movie. It really chronicled how Billy Beane has changed the game. And then, of course, the Red Sox start doing it on a greater scale because they're doing Moneyball with money. Jonah Hill got nominated for an Oscar for this movie. He was so good. Playing basically a caricature of several different people, one of them being Paul DePodesta, who was a good executive in his own right, then helped rebuild the Mets and is now rebuilding the Browns. Yeah. Number 6 is the true story of Jim Morris, The Rookie, starring Dennis Quaid. this is one of the ones that make you tear up, especially when he has to tell his kid he's made it to the big leagues. For those that don't know, the rookie Jim Morris was a prospect, left-handed pitcher. He was injured, gave it up, became a chemistry teacher. He was the baseball coach at the high school, and then he was throwing one day, and he was throwing gas. Turns out he was throwing 98 miles an hour. He then goes to an open tryout. He gets signed by the Tampa Bay Devil Rays. That's how long ago this was. And he makes his major league debut in Texas. He throws 3 fastballs by Royce Clayton. I believe he pitched 1 or 2, maybe 2 more years in the big leagues. I know he did end up in Dodgers camp, which is where he gave it up. Another injury kind of got to him. But again, another great performance by Dennis Quaid in a sports film. Number 5 is 8 Men Out, the chronicling of the 1919 Chicago White Sox, or as we like to call them, the Black Sox. Now, you never expressly see them throw the World Series, but this portrayal of it was out of this world, and it dealt with more greed and anger than it did actual cheating and gambling, which is why they say a lot of these guys who decided to throw the World Series did it. The ensemble cast is out of this world. Michael Rooker, who went on to be Yondu Udanta in the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, and of course he was on The Walking Dead. You have the dad from Frasier is in it. Charlie Sheen is in it. D.B. Sweeney. John Cusack. David Strathairn plays Eddie Seacott. I mean, it's a great cast, a great film, and it definitely shows you a look inside what happened during the Black Sox scandal. The top 4 are interchangeable. 4, 3, and 2. Number 1 is not interchangeable. Number 4, Major League. Maybe the single most quoted sports film in all of history. Everybody knows Wild Thing. Everybody knows that it's too high. No, it's not. It's gone. Everybody knows, look at this effing guy. Major League is one of the greatest comedy films of all time, let alone baseball movies. My love for it also stems from the fact that I know people who would tell stories about how for many years after the film was made, people would go to places to watch Major League in Cleveland and cry at the end because the Indians won. I remember being at the Jake in the 90s, and when they called Jose Mesa in the closed games, it was Lou Brown going, "Give me Vaughn." Number 3, and by the way, the last 3 are Kevin Costner movies, because he is the ultimate baseball movie guy. Number 3, For Love of the Game, the most recent of the Kevin Costner baseball movies. Kevin Costner, Kelly Preston, J.K. Simmons, Brian Keith, who is no longer with us, who was also in the Bourne Identity films. John C. Reilly was the catcher. A Hall of Fame pitcher on his final legs on a day when his on-again, off-again girlfriend decided to leave him for good, throws a perfect game in Yankee Stadium in his final start. The 2 things that get me in this movie. 1 is Vin Scully is the one doing the call. So it's the man. But the other is how he decides to tell people he retired. And of course that is he's sitting on the bench and he says, "Hey Mike, you got a pen?" He gives him one. And he writes and tells, "Go give this to so-and-so's nephew." And the trainer walks away and looks down at the ball, which says, "Tell them I'm through, for love of the game." He was selling the Tigers, and they were going to trade Billy to, I believe it was the Giants. The trainer stops, looks at the ball, turns around and looks at Kevin Costner, and you can see his whole body slump. He goes out, he finishes it off, and Vin Scully delivers my favorite line of the film: "The cathedral that is Yankee Stadium belongs to a chapel." Number 2 is Bull Durham, the second most quoted baseball film. If you grew up in the 80s and 90s and you watched this movie and you played baseball, there wasn't one of us who didn't try and remake the mound visit with Tim Robbins and Kevin Costner from the final actual game action in the movie. Oh, when they tell him everything they're dealing with, Costner is legit asking for guidance. And he says, well, candlesticks make a good gift or a place setting. Let's get two. And he runs off the field. Just thinking about it, I'm laughing. But Bull Durham really took you through the bus leagues. Crash Davis is a AAA catcher who is one step away from getting back to the big leagues, and he gets sold and sent to AA to work on Tim Robbins, who played Nuke LaLoosh. Susan Sarandon was phenomenal in this movie. So Bull Durham ends up at number 2. And the number 1 baseball film, to me, of all time. If you build it, he will come. That, of course, is Major League. Jeez. That, of course, is Field of Dreams. Not just for the cast. Ray Liotta, James Earl Jones, Kevin Costner. Not just for the story. Not just for the end. This is a movie about fathers and sons more than it is a baseball movie. It's just based around baseball. They're actually supposed to play a game. They were supposed to play a game at that field, which is real, in Iowa. Ray Liotta was on Colin Cowherd years ago and actually said, you know, the Field of Dreams is the Notebook for guys. And as I sat there and thought about it, I went, yeah, you know what? It kind of is. But the thing I remember is James Earl Jones' speech. Because the one constant in the country has been baseball. America has rolled on like an army of steamrollers. It's been erased like a blackboard, rebuilt and erased again. So to recap the top 10 baseball films in my opinion, The Babe at number 10, A League of Their Own at number 9, The Sandlot at 8, Moneyball at 7, The Rookie at 6, 8 Men Out at 5, Major League at 4, For Love of the Game at 3, Bull Durham at 2, and Field of Dreams at number 1. So I've gone on for 42 minutes about my favorite films. Just so you know, with the exception of 3 of these movies, I own them all. My collection is over 500 titles, or just about 500 titles. Obviously, sports movies are a big genre with me because sports are a big part of my outside of family life. So as I mentioned at the beginning, next Sunday night, 8:30 p.m. on YouTube, we are going to go live again with Alex and Tone, and we are going to discuss what's going to happen with this upcoming Major League season if it's played. Of course, now we're hearing that there are more COVID-positive tests in the Major League camps. New York has enacted a travel ban, which means anybody in Florida cannot get into New York State because the Mets and Yankees are both going to train in New York. If I read it right, and I could be wrong, the Mets are going to use Citi Field and Keyspan Park in Brooklyn, or MCU Park in Brooklyn, whichever one it is. And I think I read the Yankees were going to use Yankee Stadium and where the Staten Island Yankees play. So we're going to get to that on Sunday night. So definitely check out the YouTube channel where we are now, or check out the audio, which will be up shortly thereafter. As always, Big Rican can be found on Anchor, Google, Spotify, Pocket Cast, Radio Public, and Breaker, and of course on timeskew.com as part of the Timeskew Podcast Network. We can be found on YouTube, Big Rican on Sports, Facebook, Big Rican on Sports, Instagram, Big Rican on Sports, and of course Twitter, at Big Rican on Sport. Again, we're going to come to you next week with another baseball one, and I'm working on a couple of different ones coming up for later in the summer. Everybody have a great rest of your weekend. Enjoy the weather, although we're getting a lot of rain here in upstate New York, and I will see you guys in a week. Have a good one.